Welcome to Living Stones University. So glad you decided to join us again. For those of you returning, we sure appreciate you. We're right smack dab, well, we're not smack dab in the middle. How's that for Okie slang? We're not smack dab in the middle of Revelation anymore. I've been saying that for a while. It's kind of like I think I spent 10 years saying, yeah, I've been in the ministry for 20 years, you know. 10 years goes by. Well, actually, I'd make that 30. Now I've been saying 30 for I don't know how long. But yeah. So far we've met 5 enemies of God. We've met the dragon. And we met him in Revelation 12 and 13. The beast, in chapter 13, the beast rise up out of the sea and the beast rising up out of the earth. In the next vision, our lesson last week, chapters 15 and 16, we saw what happens to those who worship the beast. They're enemies of God. They have to suffer the wrath of God, and those bowls are poured out on them. Now today we're going to be introduced to this harlot. And it's there's a good reason why they say Mystery Babylon. Because this is truly a mystery. I think you're about to see, but this is another one of those crossroads where preterists are going to chime in because there's some very important passages of scripture here for their hermeneutic. Dispensationalists have their approach, as I will be giving mine today. So with all that in mind, let's just jump on into and start reading the scriptures, and let's see what we got here. It says, then one of the 7 angels who had the 7 bowls came and talked with me, saying to me, come, I will show you the judgment of the great harlot who sits on many waters, with whom the kings of the earth have committed fornication, and the inhabitants of the earth were made drunk with the wine of her fornication. Now this is mysterious here, because who is this woman? He just starts out talking like we already know about her. Do we? Well, as a matter of fact, yes, we do. I mean, I mentioned her way back in Revelation 12. But see, here so far, this is Revelation 17, verse 1. This is the first verse. We haven't mentioned, there's no mention of a harlot anywhere. Even in chapters 13 and 14, where Babylon is fallen in chapter 14, that's the first mention, Babylon is fallen. But we still haven't seen it yet. It's just inaugurated with that prophetic utterance, right? Well, there's nothing about a harlot here, nothing. So where did we meet? We got to go back to chapter 12 and 13, where if you'll recall, you knew really chapter 12 is one of the most important chapters to understand the second half of Revelation, and it's gotten hardly any views. I don't understand. It looks like probably most of my subscribers have viewed it, but people, if you're chiming in just out of curiosity and stuff, you need to watch these shows. Go back and watch them if you want to understand what I'm saying. That's fine if you don't. You're just checking in and it's not interesting to you. That's fine and dandy. I understand that. But if you're really interested, you need to go back and look at Revelation, all of these. I mean, if you want to follow along with the all-millennial view of what Brother Terry's saying, and if you want to go ahead and criticize Brother Terry, why don't you listen first to what Brother Terry's saying before you criticize what Brother Terry is teaching, okay? But if you'll go back to Revelation 12, at that time we were introduced to a woman, but not this woman. We were introduced to a woman whom I described as the womb of righteousness through which God brings to birth his plans on the earth and makes them manifest in the earth. She goes all the way back to Genesis chapter 3:15. We talked about all that. I'm not going to go. We've talked about it several shows since Revelation 12, so I'm not going to go back over it again. Go back and watch it. But this woman we're going to meet today is the exact opposite of that woman. If you'll recall in Revelation 12, I was talking about how Satan is an imitator. He's got his own false trinity. The dragon, the beast out of the sea, and the beast out of the earth, or antichrist, false prophet. That's his own false trinity. He imitates everything God does because he wants to be worshipped as God. He's got his own. We have Jesus Christ. He's got his own antichrist. We have the woman that through that seed that the Messiah would come. We talked about all that. This virgin woman. This virgin woman is on God's bringing God's plans. Well, here we have a harlot woman. The virgin woman represents the New Jerusalem, a city. Well, here this harlot woman is associated with earthly Jerusalem, and we're going to see that. Now, do we want to be dogmatic and say, as a preterist would, that this revelation that Jerusalem is Babylon, Jerusalem is that harlot, and then that's where it stops and that's it? No, see, I don't go there. I don't have any problem agreeing with the preterist, saying yes, this is definitely talking about Jerusalem, but it's not a final picture of what's going to happen, and I'll explain that as we go. But this woman is a harlot, whereas the woman in Revelation 12 is a virgin. So there's just these total opposite things going on here. Let's continue to read here. Let's go to verse 3 and see where it takes us here. I'm kind of flying by the seat of my pants because I've studied this a lot trying to prepare for this. But let me tell you, brothers and sisters, gets difficult to understand. Even studying as much as I do, it still gets confusing. And so he carried me away in the spirit into the wilderness. Wow, now I want to stop right there. Again, we saw that in Revelation chapter 12. And this wilderness seems to be the spot it's this place in the spirit realm where John is taken to see these visions of the woman and then this woman. And periodically he's taken to this wilderness where it seems to be the place where God shows these prophetic symbols and going to be manifested in the earth. And so here we're seeing that John's taken in the spirit into the wilderness, and he sees this woman sitting on a scarlet beast, which is full of names of blasphemy, having 7 heads and 10 horns. And then it goes on to talk about how the woman was dressed and arrayed in purple and scarlet. That's speaking of high-ranking luxury, and scarlet being sin laced, sin saturated, and adorned with gold and precious stones and pearls. So just as God's woman represents everything good that's going to be birthed into the earth, this woman represents everything evil that Satan wants to bring manifest into the earth. The exact opposite of the other woman. But we see this woman's dressed to the hilt here. She's dressed to the nines. Total, she represents, this is because she represents, this woman, this harlot represents pure decadence and everything that is evil, everything that is luxurious and seductive to draw people away from God and away from the teachings of Christ, to tempt them and to lure them away from holiness. That's what this woman stands for. Decadence, pure hedonistic revelry, and over luxurious allurement of evil that may be dressed up to look good and appealing, but it's just evil and rotten to the core. That's this woman. And sitting on this beast, so that shows her close association with this beast. We can't forget it. And we're going to see later, because she's so closely associated with this beast, she's also closely associated with the beast that comes out of the earth, as well as the beast that comes out of the sea. So we'll expand on that a little bit more. But it says this woman was arrayed in purple and in scarlet and adorned with gold and precious stones and pearls. Again, just description of her position in the world and how she's admired and looked up to, esteemed highly, and highly desired, because of her delicacies and her seductive allurements. They look so appealing and so good. And she has a golden cup full of the abominations and filthiness of her fornication. So she's carrying with her the very thing that is going to measure her own judgment, as we'll see later. So, and on her forehead is a name that was written, Mystery, Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots and of the abominations of the earth. Wow, okay? This is a mystery. And when we see that word mystery, don't take that lightly. This is mind-boggling, okay? We're about to see here. But notice this woman is a mother. I'm going to highlight that in a little bit. But, well, now let's just go there now. She's a mother. What is the distinctive of a mother as opposed to a maiden or a female or a woman? What is the distinction when I say mother rather than one of those other terms? It's someone who's giving birth that those other terms don't necessarily indicate. This does. So therefore we can assume safely this woman births, just like the good woman, the virgin births God's plans and things. This woman births evil. She'll birth Jezebels, right? We see Jezebel, we've already saw her in the opening letters to the church. We see her mentioned through Scripture, or the woman in general, apocalyptically and prophetically, is often symbolic of the source through which Satan was able to access men and cause him to fall and stumble, was through the woman, Eve. And so therefore she stands as a symbol, the woman does, as the avenue of corruption through which man is corrupted. So we know that she produces other harlots, right? Now, I took the liberty, who is this woman? Well, some people say she's Rome. Some people say this harlot is Jerusalem. Some people say this harlot represents America. And you know what? There's some validity to all of it. And I'm going to explain why, because what I've already explained is, I already told you who the woman is. She's the exact opposite of the virgin woman who represents New Jerusalem. This is the harlot woman. And you know, the word harlot, well, let's just go through. I took the liberty of going through everything we just read about this woman. And I just kind of condensed it into 7 deals, 7 clues to her identity. And I even went ahead to Revelation 18 because it deals with the finality of this woman in judgment, and got a little bit of information from there. So let's just go through these one by one and see if it's Jerusalem, if it's Rome, is this America? Who is this? Well, let's just kind of weigh this. I want you to see that these descriptions, these clues fit pretty much all of these. Not just Jerusalem, although I do believe Jerusalem is indicated here. Hosea makes it clear. God told Hosea to go marry a prostitute and take her as wife, to indicate and show the people of Israel they've cheated on me. They're no longer, I'm going to divorce them. And so there's no doubt this is all pointing to Jerusalem, but not only Jerusalem. And I'll explain that further. Why? Well, because she's a representative of, just like the woman in Revelation 12, symbolizes so much from Genesis to Revelation. She's the womb of righteousness through which God births all of his plans. We see her over and over bringing these things into manifestation. Well, that's what this woman does, the same thing. So it's the woman and the beast and all these creatures coming up, these are animated characters in spiritual visions that symbolize things. These aren't actual real monsters and stuff. So you've got to really be careful not to look at them that way. These are animated creatures that are just made up to symbolize something that God's trying to show us in terms that we can understand how we're affected here on this earth. So the first thing we see in our clues to her identity is that she's a harlot. Well, so then the people say that this points to Jerusalem, which it does. But I want to be the devil's advocate for a minute here. If harlot is the word you're going to use to describe this woman with such wide symbolism, it doesn't really describe, it doesn't bring to my mind when you say harlot that this woman was once married and then became unfaithful. Wouldn't it be more accurate if we're talking about a woman who symbolizes that she was faithful, a faithful city to God at one time and then become unfaithful? Wouldn't it be more accurate to describe her as an adulteress rather than a harlot? See, a harlot could be a harlot her whole life and never ever have been married and never have been concerned with trying to be faithful. But an adulteress, it's clear when I say adulteress, it means she is or was married and became unfaithful. So that's something to consider. You can't just be dogmatic with this because there are other options to look at. But another clue we see that she sits on many waters, and at the end of this chapter we'll see that those many waters, they're defined for us as many peoples, tribes, tongues, and nations. Okay, well, if this woman then is pictured as Jerusalem, the earthly Jerusalem, that doesn't fit. Jerusalem wasn't ruling over many nations. As a matter of fact, maybe under the kingdom of David or even Solomon, but once the divided kingdom came and they fell, once Babylon came or the Assyrians came, it was they weren't ruling over anyone. They were subservient for the next 500, 600, 700 years, and really for even today, until 1948 anyway. They were subservient to someone else. So that doesn't really fit Jerusalem. It does fit Rome, doesn't it? It does kind of fit America too. So does that first one, fits Rome and America both. The harlot. We're America. Well, we'll go into more of America here in a little bit in the future here. But also the fact that they were all made drunk with her wine because of her delicacies. They enjoy. Well, that doesn't really fit Jerusalem. Everyone doesn't indulge in her delicacies. Rome, it does kind of fit. America, it does kind of fit. Doesn't fit Jerusalem. Didn't fit them back then. Doesn't fit them now. The woman sits on the beast. This means that she's closely associated with the beast. Now, beast can be identified, and really is here. The beast is identified as Rome. The woman is identified as Jerusalem. But again, I'm not going to be dogmatic and say that's the end like a preterist would, and that's past, and now it's over, and we're not going to apply any more interpretations to this scripture for the future. I do, because I think these are hints and microcosms that point to what a future is going to look like just prior to the return of Christ. But that doesn't really fit. It does fit Jerusalem because Jerusalem depended on Rome for its power, right? I mean, that's what this picture shows us. This woman literally depends on the beast in order to succeed at her allurements and her corrupting people and alluring them away from God. So that kind of fits. Number 4, she's a mother. Again, so she produces, in other words, other harlots. Well, it kind of fits, I guess, Jerusalem. It fits America and it fits Rome. That kind of fits. All three of them could kind of fit into that, kind of. Okay. The blood of the saints is on her hands. That definitely fits Jerusalem. It also fits Rome. Both were guilty of killing the prophets and apostles, especially Jerusalem, though. Not really, America doesn't play into that part at all. Then, as I went ahead to chapter 18, it said that we're warned, that the believers are warned to come out of this woman, come out of her. So that's where we get an association with the false prophet or the beast that comes up out of the earth. We know she's associated with the beast that comes up out of the sea because it says so here, but it doesn't mention the beast comes out of the earth. But because she does produce Jezebels, and she does lure people away from God, she's going to be in the church trying to do that, to get not only people who are already away from God to stay away from God, but to get people who are seeking God away from God. So we're told to come out of her. And so therefore we're going to find this woman in the church. That does associate her with the beast that rises up out of the earth. So that does look kind of like Jerusalem, I suppose. She's become a dwelling place of demons at this point, where she no longer, just prior to 70 AD, was good for nothing but judgment. She had rejected the Messiah, and there was nothing left but judgment for her, just total possession of demonic leadership. And therefore, Jerusalem was totally and utterly destroyed. So it does fit Jerusalem. It does fit America as a dwelling place of demons, and if it's the old ancient Babylon, if it's Rome, that fits a lot of places, doesn't it? So really, this kind of, it just tells us that there's a variety. These are general, this is general terminology that just kind of points to corruption in general, and that applies to so many cities or nations and peoples. And therefore, my description in the beginning rings more true than all of them. And these are rulers of darkness. This is spiritual wickedness in high places. These aren't real people here. Yes, there's going to surface an antichrist figures from these government systems that are produced and ruled by these rulers of darkness in the spirit realm. But, beloved, this is spirit vision. These are spiritual beasts in the spirit realm. Yes, they have effects on earth, but that's how America can look like Babylon. That's how Rome can look like Babylon. That's how Jerusalem can look like Babylon, because of the influence of these spirits of darkness and these rulers of darkness, and these principalities and powers like the Prince of Persia, the Prince of Greece we saw in Daniel. Those are very real powers, and they do affect leadership on this earth and the kings of this earth. And that's how these places can become infected with their ideologies. And so therefore it's kind of not real smart to just apply it to one city, one person, one people's, because eventually their goal is to cover the face of the earth with this, as we're going to see. So let's just continue to read on a little bit. But the angel said to me, see, so John sees all this and he marvels, he's puzzled. And so therefore the angel said to me, why do you marvel? I will tell you the mystery of the woman and of the beast that carries her, which has 7 heads and 10 horns. I'm laughing because I see this and I'm thinking, oh good, you're going to explain the mystery to me. And then he explains the mystery and I'm scratching my head going, could you explain the explanation for me? Because it's one of those, kind of like I used to love watching Kung Fu, where the sage would always, he's asking the sage a question, the Kung Fu master, and the master always answers his question with another question. You know, so if you want to know the answer to your original question, you got to first find the answer to the answer that he gave. That's what's going on here. That the answer to this mystery is not crystal clear, not to me anyway. But he says, I'll tell you about this beast here, and those who dwell on the earth will marvel, whose names are not written in the book of life from the foundation of the world, when they see the beast that was and is not. So there again, well, wait a minute, that's the first time this has been mentioned. In chapter 17, nothing about this beast was mentioned that he was alive before. Now, that was all in Revelation 13. So this tells us this is that same beast. All of these definitions of the beast that was and is not and yet is, None of that's mentioned in 17 at all, just until here. But it was first mentioned in 13, describing this beast, that he had 7 heads, and he looked at one of the heads, not the whole beast, but one of the heads of the beast was wounded, it said back there in Revelation 13. And he could tell that it was a mortal wound, but and yet he was somehow still alive. He was rising up, fixing to go into perdition. That's a picture of that short season where this antichrist will be allowed to develop and rule over the saints for a very short season and then done away with quickly at the coming of Christ. Oops, okay, so let's back up here. So here's the mind which has wisdom. Okay, this is it. The 7 heads are 7 mountains. Thank you. Okay, so I can dig that. 7 mountains are kingdoms. Okay, mountains are kingdoms. We know that. Okay, so I'm looking at 7 kingdoms here. Thank you, Holy Spirit. Then he goes on to say, but there's also 7 kings. 5 have fallen, 1 is, and the other has not yet come. Okay, now we got a problem. Are we looking at kingdoms or are we looking at kings? Because you can't be looking at both of them in the same context at the same time and have them existing side by side. It doesn't work. Now, I know the preterists do this with Rome as their focus, but I'm about to show you where you run into a lot of problems. So are we looking at this as kingdoms or are we looking at this as kings? And there's a big difference between the two. If we look at this as 7 kingdoms, it says, remember, it said 5 have fallen. Okay, well, let's just go through this. Let me get out of the way here. We're going to see that Brother Hendrickson, he puts Babylon, Nimrod's Babylon, at the beginning of these 7 kingdoms, described as this beast has 7 heads. Others, and I tend to probably agree with others, on Egypt. That's who I'm going to go with, because both are mentioned in their description. But Egypt is used quite a bit also as a picture of the church in general in our day. Babylon is also, but it's mentioned in a way of corrupting influence, whereas Egypt is a kind of an example picture of it could be either one, but I'm going to go with Egypt. Okay, Assyria, Babylon. So 5 have fallen. 1, 2 brings us down to Greek. 1 is Rome. So that all adds up. 5 have fallen. 1 is. Okay, this and the preterists are going to say, the preterists go with the early date of the book of Revelation, that it was written before 70 AD. Okay, so the problem that we run into with this, though, is 5 have fallen, 1 is, then 1 is to come after that, and only going to rule for a short while. Okay, here's where we run into problems. It's always with this number 7 and 8 where we run into the problems. In either view, with kingdoms or kings. This is your problem area. This is where the mystery lies. Well, when did Rome fall? Rome fell. See, these are clear. They fell, another kingdom took power. They fell, another kingdom took power. They fell, we go through that. Well, Rome fell in late 5th century, around 473 AD. But what kingdom rose up after that? Well, I guess we could go with the Byzantine kingdom, which was really an extension of Rome. And now this kind of fits. That the wounded head, and then it continues on, because the Byzantine Empire basically was a Roman Empire continued, whereas they existed for another 1,000 years. So that blows your short while. One comes after him must exist for a short while, and then he goes into perdition. Well, that doesn't make sense. And then if I eliminate the Byzantine, then are we supposed to go all the way up to the Turks? Let's say the Byzantine was be included in Rome. And the Roman went all the way up, the Byzantine Empire went all the way up to the 15th century. So that's a long time. That's not a short time. And And so then are we supposed to put the Turks in there, the Ottoman Empire that rose up and took down the Byzantine Empire? None of that makes sense. And then if we take the Turks and put them there, are they the ones that are going to end up being the present day in our time, or whoever's alive when Christ returns? Is that the empire the Turks are going to be in power, oppressing with the Antichrist figure and stuff, oppressing God's people? Well, it makes more sense to go with the other, the Byzantine. And even America is very Rome-like. If you look at our legal buildings, and our Capitol buildings are structured after Roman architecture. Our government in America is a democratic republic. Rome was more of a, I don't know, an imperialistic republic, but they were both republics, and our government is very similar to Rome's government that was existing then. They had a Senate. We've got a Senate. We have representatives of the people. We have an executive branch that has a president. They had the emperor. So, yeah, it'd make more sense to go with the Byzantine Empire on that, but none of it really works. So, you see, yeah, it works great up until we get to number 7. Well, what if we're talking about kings? Now, this is where your preterists and partial preterists are going to lean. They're focused on that head, which is probably the 7th head, in all the way back in chapter 13, where John sees this beast with the 7 heads, and one's wounded. It's probably the 7th head, that head of Rome. It's probably that Rome head that's wounded and then comes back to life. And that fits with the Nero. If we're going to go here, 5 have fallen, 1 is, that brings us to Galba. That doesn't make any sense. Right off the bat, that doesn't make sense. So in order for this to start making sense as a preterist, I'm going to have to put Julius Caesar above Augustus as the first emperor. But see, Julius Caesar wasn't an emperor. Julius Caesar was a dictator. And this was before Rome became the new republic. And now, and I can see putting Julius Caesar there because he ended up adopting Octavius, who later was known as Augustus, Caesar Augustus. So if we put Julius Caesar at the top, then 5 have fallen, 1 is, brings us to Nero, who was ruling at the time of as 60, during 67, 68 AD, when the preterists claimed the book of Revelation was written under Nero. And he died, and that he committed suicide, and those rumors have it that he came back to life. And even his name in Hebrew adds up in gematria to 666. So there's a lot, man, yeah, that's powerful. But then here's where you run into problems again. The 7th. Okay, 5, 1 is the 6th, the 7th. He must go for a short while. Okay, well, I guess you could say that 2 years is a short while, but the problem is 3 emperors after Nero, it was only a 2-year period of time. That was a very short period of time. You went through 3 emperors. It doesn't fit, beloved. And if I'm going to say, well, that's why we go with Domitian. The book was written under Domitian back in 96 AD. Well, if I do that, then I got to go back up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm starting with Galba. 5 have fallen. 1 is Domitian at the time the book was written. Well, why would you just start with Galba? Why would you eliminate Caesar and Julius Caesar and then all these others? Why would you just start randomly in the middle of a bunch of rulers? It doesn't make any sense. And then Nerva must come after him for a short while and then goes into perdition. That doesn't really fit Nerva. A couple of years again. But then it brings you to Trajan, who is the 8th, who is of the 7. Well, yeah, he may be of that because he's part of that kingdom, but what's the significance of Trajan in our modern day and rising up Antichrist? None of it really fits. None of it is significant as kings. So can you see how it just, blood, it does not fit perfectly. there's some, just like Daniel chapter 9, there's some really interesting stuff. And some of the math works real good. But then you have to kind of fudge some of the others into place to make it work. And that's not good biblical exegesis. This is somewhat of a mystery. And even after this explanation, to me, remains somewhat of a mystery, although I have some answers to some of my questions. Let's go on to read, though. Let's continue. The 10 horns which you saw are 10 kings who have received no kingdom as yet. Okay, again. So here we have the 10 kings back in the picture. Let's put them back into the picture if we're talking about Rome at this time. And we're going to insist this is talking about Rome and the 5 have fallen that brings us to Nero. Well, then who are these 10 kings? Are they 10 vassal kings that are ruling in various areas of the province of Rome? And they have no power when this was being prophesied, which is only 2 or 3 years before the destruction of Jerusalem, and they're not in power yet. And then they have to receive power, and then they overthrow the harlot woman also, all that within a couple of years' time. It doesn't make sense. You see, these 10 kings who have no kingdom as of yet, all this language seems, every time it pops up, it seems to be reserved for that mystery part, that they're the ones that are going to be existing in the last days when that antichrist figure will rise up out of that antichrist system, being assisted by this false religious system and the figures that lead that system. So, yeah, that's kind of how I look at that. That just brings more proof to the difficulty of this interpretation the preterists want to put on there. They'll receive authority for 1 hour as the kings of the beast. And these are of one mind, and they will give their power and authority to the beast. These will make war with the Lamb, and the Lamb will overcome them, for he is Lord of lords and the King of kings, and those who are with him are called, chosen, and faithful. Here's a picture of the second coming of Christ, defeating the devil and all of his enemies at Armageddon, which was in chapter 16, because it says these 10 kings will come together, they'll make war with the Lamb. That's how it ended, remember, chapter 16 in our last lesson. It ended with Armageddon, gathering them together in the place to make war with God at a place called Armageddon, and then the 7th bowl is poured out. It is done. The kingdom of the earth has become the kingdom of our Father. So you see, that's the end, beloved. It's just plain as day there. Then he said to me, the waters which you saw where the harlot sits are peoples, multitudes, nations, and tongues. And the 10 horns which you saw on the beast, these will hate the harlot, make war, and make her desolate and naked, and eat her flesh and burn her with fire. So again, here we see the destruction of this harlot prophesied again for about the 5th time. And it's going to happen in chapter 18 when we get there. Listen to this. For God has put it in their hearts to fulfill his purpose, to be of one mind and to give their kingdom to the beast until the words of God are fulfilled. Boom! There, that takes us all the way back to Revelation chapters 4, 5, and 6, when we're talking about the seals in the throne room of God, and the Lamb comes, he's opening the seals, right? All of this that we've been looking at, all of these judgments, all of these bowls, all of these trumpet judgments, all of the seals, all of this stuff going on, ordained by God. The Lamb is orchestrating the whole thing, and it's unfolding exactly as he has intended and planned, to the letter. That brings me great comfort, beloved. No matter what happens to me on this earth, I may not enjoy some of it, but you know what? I belong to him, and I can rest assured he's orchestrating all of this, and he's got good things in store for us. Amen. The woman who you saw is that great city which reigns over the kings of the earth. So again, the woman is a harlot and a city, just like the woman is a virgin and a city, New Jerusalem. This woman is a harlot and earthly Jerusalem. However, as I've made clear, this is not a preterist view where I'm going to say that happened. That's my interpretation of it, and there's nothing to look forward to. No, I'm going to apply a lot of these pictures are going to be unfolding just prior to the coming of Christ when he comes. And we've seen a lot of these uprisings already in the past. So I've already told you how I view these antichrist systems rising and falling and being quelled from time to time until God's perfect timing is come, and he is the only one who knows when that is. But beloved, hopefully this has kind of helped you. I know we didn't solve the mystery today. I just kind of gave you my view of it. And maybe some of you can send me an email and enlighten me as to the rest of this mystery. But until then, just remember how much I love you. Thank you again for those of you who are praying for me. I'm going in for chemotherapy day after tomorrow. It's going to be a tough time. Please keep me in your prayers going ahead. Sure love you guys. Be salt and be light.